There is a science that a Nobel laureate helped investigate. A British government committee, chaired by the head of the Electricity Commission and staffed by 6 Royal Society fellows, documented 30 to 50% yield increases in controlled trials. They spent £8,000 and 18 years studying it. They acknowledged the effect was real, and then, starting in 1922, they stamped their findings not for publication. Only 2 copies were printed. Today, China uses it on 3,600 hectares of greenhouses. In Western agriculture, it is called pseudoscience. The archive opens in the Arctic Circle in the 1880s, where a Finnish physics professor noticed something that no one had thought to question. Carl Selim Lemstrom traveled north to study the aurora borealis. He was a physicist at the University of Helsinki, interested in the electrical phenomena that painted the northern sky with light. During his expeditions, he noticed something strange about the trees. They grew with astonishing vigor. This should not have been remarkable. These trees had only a few months of growing season. The soil was thin, the sunlight was fleeting, and yet the forests of the far north thrived, as if something invisible was feeding them. Lemstrom asked a question no one had asked. Could the electrical field generated by the aurora, the same force that crackled across the sky in curtains of green and violet light, be fertilizing these trees? He spent the next 2 decades proving it. Back in Helsinki, Lemstrom built an apparatus using a Wimshurst electrostatic generator. He charged overhead wires to approximately 10 kilovolts per meter, with pointed wire ends that allowed corona discharge into the air above his crops. Then he measured what happened. Potatoes showed yield increases of 40%. Some crops reached 70% gains. Carrots increased by 125%. Greenhouse strawberries ripened in half the usual time. Beets developed higher sugar content. But here is what made this science and not speculation. Lemstrom also found that cabbage, turnips, and flax grew better without electrification. The effect was real, and it was crop-specific. This was not a universal miracle. This was a phenomenon that behaved like phenomena do, with conditions, limitations, and measurable variations. Lemstrom called it electroculture. The idea was that atmospheric electricity, the same force that powers lightning and that crackles through the aurora, could be captured and fed to plants. In 1898, he presented his findings to the British Association for the Advancement of Science in Bristol. They listened. This was not fringe speculation from an amateur tinkering in his garden. This was a university professor presenting replicated data to one of the world's most prestigious scientific bodies. Within 20 years, the British government would create a formal committee to investigate his claims. And across the English Channel, a French baker would build something even more ambitious. Étienne Justin Christoflot was born on June 26, 1865, in Larquet, a small town in the Loire Valley. He began his working life as a baker. His earliest patents, filed at the turn of the century, covered heating systems and mechanical kneading machines, the practical concerns of a man who made his living from ovens and dough. But somewhere along the way, he became obsessed with something else entirely. By the 1920s, Christoflot had transformed himself into an inventor. He moved to La Queue-les-Yvelines, a town west of Paris, where he established a factory and created what he called his potager électrique. Over 3 decades, he filed approximately 40 patents. At least 11 of them were for electroculture devices. His masterwork was the appareil électromagnétique terreau-céleste, the electromagnetic terreau-celestial apparatus. It looked like something Nikola Tesla might have dreamed up for a garden. The apparatus began with a dry timber post, 20 to 25 feet tall above ground, buried 5 feet deep. Atop it sat a metal box containing magnetized steel plates, flexible wire antennas, and a horizontal tail that pointed toward magnetic south. A zinc saucer on top held a riveted copper plate. When wetted by rain, dew, or frost, these two metals formed a primitive voltaic battery. A thermopile made of copper and zinc generated current from temperature differentials as the sun moved across the sky. From this apparatus, galvanized iron wire ran down the post, insulated by porcelain, then buried 10 to 18 inches deep in trenches, running magnetic north. Each wire, Christoflo claimed, influenced a strip of ground 14 feet wide. On April 26, 1930, Christoflo summoned a huissier de justice to officially certify what grew in his garden. The legal documents recorded leeks with base diameters of 18 to 20 centimeters, wheat with leaves measuring 73 centimeters, and ox heart cabbages over 2 meters in diameter, standing nearly 1.5 meters tall. Cabbages wider than a man is tall, certified by a legal official. In his book published in 1921, Christoflo addressed himself to working people like himself. Laborious phalanx, to whom I have the honor to belong by my birth, I come now towards you to raise my voice in favor of a great invention which will be, if you understand me, one of the great factors of the resurrection and prosperity of the whole world. He believed he had found something that could change agriculture forever. He also believed powerful interests were trying to stop him. On November 27, 1926, the newspaper L'Humanité reported that Christoflo had brought a case before the Tribunal de Versailles. The headline read, "Engineer Christoflo asked justice to protect his process against the Chemical Fertilizer Trust." The outcome of that case has never been found in available records, but Christoflo was not alone. Across the English Channel, something far more official was underway, something involving Nobel laureates, Royal Society fellows, and government funding. And what they found would be stamped not for publication. In 1918, as World War I drew to a close, the British government faced a crisis. Food supplies had been threatened by German U-boats. The nation had come dangerously close to starvation, and Lord Ernley, president of the Board of Agriculture, decided to investigate every possible avenue for increasing crop yields, including electroculture. He established the British Electroculture Committee under the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and he assembled a team that would make modern skeptics pause. Sir John Snell, chairman of the Electricity Commission, led the committee. Among its members was C.T.R. Wilson, who would win the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1927. The committee included approximately 6 fellows of the Royal Society, some of the most credentialed scientists in the British Empire. This was not amateur hour. This was the scientific establishment taking electroculture seriously. Professor V.H. Blackman at Imperial College London conducted the key experiments. He used overhead direct current wires carrying 60 volts and 1 milliampere of current. Between 1918 and 1920, his team ran 12 controlled trials. 11 of 12 trials showed positive effects. 8 showed yield increases of 30 to 50% for oats, barley, wheat, and clover. These results were published in the Journal of Agricultural Science. The committee received £8,000 in government grants. They published 18 interim reports over 18 years of continuous investigation. And then, something strange happened. Historian David Kinahan, working from primary documents at the National Archives at Kew, discovered what happened to those reports. Catalogue reference MAF 33913 contains the committee's records, and starting in 1922, the annual reports, the ones containing positive data, were labelled not for publication. Only 2 printed copies were made. 18 years of government-funded research, a Nobel laureate on the committee, yield increases of 30 to 50% in controlled trials, and the British government buried the results in filing cabinets where they sat, largely unexamined, for nearly a century. The committee's final report, issued in February 1937, contains a devastating paradox. It reads, "In spite of the failures of recent years, the field results obtained some years ago and the earlier pot culture results would seem to have established the fact that the electroculture effect is a real one." They acknowledged the effect was real, and then they shut down the program. Why would a government committee that found what it was looking for stamp its own positive findings not for publication? The answer lies in what else was happening. In 1913, in 1918, in the decades that followed. This is not a story of deliberate conspiracy. It is something more complex and, in some ways, more disturbing. It is a story of 5 forces converging to bury an entire field of research. The first force arrived in 1909. That year, German chemist Fritz Haber succeeded in synthesizing ammonia from atmospheric nitrogen in a laboratory. By 1913, BASF had industrialized the Haber-Bosch process, creating synthetic fertilizer on an industrial scale for the first time in human history. This happened the same year electroculture was gaining scientific credibility. After World War I, the infrastructure that had produced explosives pivoted to fertilizer production. Cheap nitrogen suddenly flooded agriculture. By the late 1940s, the United States was using approximately 2 million tons of synthetic fertilizer per year. By 2014, that number exceeded 20 million tons. Today, approximately 48% of the global population is fed by crops grown with synthetic nitrogen. The global fertilizer industry is now worth over $200 billion annually. Here is the economic thesis. Synthetic fertilizer creates dependency. You must buy it every season, every year, forever. Electroculture devices, once installed, required no recurring purchases. One generates endless revenue. The other does not. The second force was institutional abandonment. In 1926, Lyman J. Briggs at the United States Department of Agriculture published Bulletin number 1379, reporting no positive results from electroculture trials at Arlington Experimental Farms. The British Committee disbanded in 1936 after 4 consecutive years of inconsistent results. And after 1968, according to Dr. Linda Chalker Scott at Washington State University, 0 publications on electroculture appeared in mainstream agricultural databases. Not 1 paper in Agricola, not 1 in Web of Science, nothing. The third force was death and war. Christophe Fleau died on July 6, 1938, at age 73. Sir John Snell, chairman of the British Committee, also died in 1938. The following year, World War II began. Christophe Fleau's factory closed. All civilian research halted, and after the war, no one resumed the work. The fourth force was genuine scientific inconsistency. The British Committee's early results showed 30 to 50% yield increases in 8 of 11 tests. But from 1932 to 1935, 4 consecutive years showed no significant increases. The effect appeared to be real, but unpredictable. And unpredictable results lose to cheap, reliable, immediately effective synthetic fertilizers every time. The fifth force is the archival mystery. They filed 18 interim reports. They found what they were looking for. and then they stamped the results not for publication. They created a committee with a Nobel laureate and 6 Royal Society fellows. They spent £8,000 in government grants, and then they disbanded without public explanation. They kept electroculture research in the filing cabinets at Kew, catalogue reference MAF 33913, where David Kinahan found it. Still restricted, still unexplained. They built a $200 billion industry on the premise that plants need synthetic nitrogen, while burying the evidence that atmospheric electricity might provide an alternative. The fertilizer industry had enormous economic incentive to oppose electroculture. Christophe Flo believed he was being persecuted. The British Committee's reports were suppressed from public view. What remains unexplained is why the British government stamped its own positive findings not for publication. While the West forgot, one country took the buried science seriously. China's government-funded electroculture program has been operational since 1990. Today, it covers over 3,600 hectares of greenhouse farms, stretching from the Gobi Desert in Xinjiang to the Pacific coast. This is the only industrial-scale implementation of electroculture in the world. The method is not copper spirals on sticks. The method is bare copper wires suspended 3 meters above crops, carrying rapid pulses of positive charge up to 50,000 volts. This is active electrical stimulation at industrial scale. He Feng is a senior technician at Yufa Jingnan Vegetable Production in Beijing. He has watched the results firsthand. Vegetable yields increased 20 to 30%. Pesticide use decreased by 70 to 100%. Fertilizer consumption dropped by 20%. Power consumption was only approximately 15 kilowatt-hours per day per hectare, trivial for the gains achieved. He reported extra revenue of nearly 1.2 million yuan, roughly $175,000 in just 2 years. He Feng said he is still running the equipment, which consumes very little power. Liu Yongyi, who owns a sightseeing agriculture company in Beijing's Daxing district, framed the benefits differently. He said, pesticide residue is a huge threat to public health. Electricity provides a physical solution to disease and pest control. It is much cleaner than chemicals. The program is growing from 1,000 to 1,300 hectares per year, approximately 40% annual expansion. China built infrastructure around a science that the West buried. Meanwhile, in America and Europe, electroculture resurfaced as something else entirely. By mid-2023, TikTok's electroculture hashtag had accumulated over 97 million views. A Facebook group called Energetic Agriculture surpassed 150,000 members. The trend featured people wrapping copper wire around sticks and placing them in their gardens. There is a problem with this. In 2025, researchers Budney and Lemoyne published the first controlled, peer-reviewed test of the social media copper rod trend in the journal PLOONE. They tested mustard greens, kale, beets, and turnips. Their conclusion was unambiguous. No consistent evidence that passive electroculture is beneficial to crop growth or yield. They noted that historical studies showing positive results used 200 volts or more. A copper rod stuck in the ground generates essentially nothing. China took the buried science seriously. They built industrial infrastructure around it. They are growing 3,600 hectares of vegetables with 70 to 100% less pesticide. The West turned it into a social media trend that does not work. So what actually works? The critical distinction is between active and passive electroculture. Active electrical stimulation, applying actual voltage and current to plants, has genuine peer-reviewed support. The British Committee documented it. Eleni Stavrinidou's team at Linköping University in Sweden demonstrated it in 2023, showing a 50% increase in barley seedling dry weight using just half a volt of direct current. China's program proves it works at scale. Passive electroculture, meaning copper rods and atmospheric antennas without measured electrical output, does not. The 2025 PLOSONE study tested it directly and found no benefit. Plants genuinely respond to electric fields. Researchers at Imperial College London showed in 2022 that Arabidopsis roots sense external electric fields and redirect their growth. Low-voltage stimulation enhances nitrogen processing. These are real biological phenomena. But a spiral of copper wire on a stick is not the same as Christoph Flo's apparatus, which was designed to generate electricity, thermopile, voltaic battery, vibrating antennas, magnetized plates. It is not the same as China's 50,000-volt pulses. If you want to experiment, understand what actually generates electrical activity. Yannick van Doorn, who holds a PhD from the University of Ghent and is the most credible modern practitioner, uses systems of magnets and beeswax capacitors, not passive rods. Do not attempt to build active high-voltage systems without electrical expertise. These can be dangerous. Be skeptical of claims that lack controlled trials. The social media version of electroculture has been scientifically tested and rejected. But here is the paradox that remains. For 280 years, scientists and inventors have documented that electricity affects plant growth. A Nobel laureate served on a government committee that found the effect was a real one. A French baker grew cabbages 2 meters wide and summoned a bailiff to certify them. A Chinese government program uses it on 3,600 hectares today. And yet the word electroculture still triggers the pseudoscience label in Western agriculture. The paradox is not whether electroculture works. The peer-reviewed evidence shows that active electrical stimulation genuinely affects plant biology. The paradox is why this knowledge was buried, why the reports were stamped not for publication, why the most promising modern research is happening in Sweden and China, while American extension services call it a myth. The conversation between electricity and agriculture is 280 years old. It was interrupted, but it was never resolved. The real questions, how much voltage, delivered how, to which species, at what cost, are still waiting to be answered. And maybe that research starts with you asking a simple question. Why did they bury the wires? Now you know.